Indiana is bringing in elite athletes. Mike Woodson's goal is to win a national championship. You have to have players that are elite, and I don't care where they come from. A lot of people mentioned Caleb Banks. There you go. Right there's the comment. Not only do they need Caleb Bank type athletes, Justin, I saw someone else say, Woody's got to play those guys. But I understand not playing Caleb Banks much. He's a freshman. He probably would, I don't want to say lost, but that would have been putting him in a horrible situation because let me tell you, Miami was badass, fast. They looked like Indiana did against in their first game against Kent State. Indiana played really hard. I noticed Miller Kopp playing at the highest level he's played all year. He was moving faster, cutting harder, and looking to shoot the ball. Now, he still did the same thing. His stats are kind of similar to what he's been doing. But Indiana got no help off of the bench again. None.
So,
and how many bench points did Miami have?
I don't have it up in front of me, but
it was 14 last night. It was like 14-0, and it had to grow.
More than 0, I can tell you that. They had it was 14. That was it. So not crazy. 14 is not a ton.
It is when yours is 0.
Well, yes, but it wasn't like they got 30, is what I'm saying. Like 14 is a solid night off your bench if you have the kind of starting rotation that Miami does, for sure. And especially if Indiana gets 0. So let's go back to this. This is my question for you, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm just merely asking the question. So you talked about the difference between Purdue's guards and the level of player Purdue recruits as opposed to what Indiana's trying to recruit. And I'm just asking this question because I don't know the answer. Because I would put Caleb Banks and CJ Gunn probably in that same category as Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith, in the sense that if you're an elite athlete, you're going to come in, you're going to be a Jalen Hood-Schifino. You're going to come in and play right away. I don't care about guys being there for a long time. So do you think Indiana needs more of those guys, or do you think they have those guys already on the You need more. Okay. Okay. Well, that's what I'm saying. When you say Indiana's recruiting elite athletes, do you think they already have them, or do you think they need to go out and get more of them?
They have to go get more of them.
Okay.
They're going to have to hit the transfer portal. They're going to have to recruit, and they're going to have to rebuild.
And
I was thinking, too, that while the end of an era has come for Indiana with Trace Jackson Davis, it's a good thing for Indiana.
I don't disagree.
This has been a long. That's a chunk. That's a piece of the Indiana story right there. It's a 4 or 5 year section, and that section is now over. Mm-hmm. It is done. It is done. It's next year starts something completely new, and no, they don't have those elite athletes now, because if they did, they would have played them last night.
Right. And that's my point. And that's not a knock on Caleb Banks, CJ Gunn, anybody else on that bench. I think they're going to be fabulous basketball players. They'll make big contributions to Indiana. So don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm just saying if those guys were elite 5-star athletes, next level prospects, they would have played last night. They would have been more integral in Indiana's rotation this season. That's all I'm saying with that point. So, And I agree. I think you're right, Jim, with the Trace Jackson Davis. I want to back you up on this, because I think a lot of people would say Indiana's going to be I think a lot of people would say it would be better for Indiana to have Trace Jackson Davis back next season. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but you also have to have this era where you have to have players that are part of your rebuild. And I don't think there's any question that from the Archie Miller – it was stuck in the mud. This program was not going anywhere. You saw it year in, year out. There was a lot of hope every single offseason, and they fell short of expectations. you had to have a guy like Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson, Xavier Johnson. You had to have those guys who were willing to be part of the rebuild. And now that Indiana is in a better position than they were 2 years ago, making the NCAA tournament back-to-back years, going from the play-in game to a solidified spot in the number 4 seed and getting to the round of 32, I know it's not the kind of steps that Indiana fans want. I understand that they want Big Ten championships and they want Sweet 16s and Final Fours and to be in a national contender again, but you have to take those baby steps. And Trace Jackson Davis helped them get to that point. Now it's time for Indiana to go out, and as you were saying, Jim, if they want to be a national contender, go out and recruit and bring in those high-caliber players, bring in more of those Jalen Hood-Schifino type guys. That's what gets you to the next level. But sometimes it's not always easy to bring those kind of guys in until you've reestablished the program. Like, I think Indiana is now back to being a national brand, and that's a credit to Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson, a lot of those guys who stuck with it. Now it's time to move on from that era and try to go and reestablish Indiana as not just a name in college basketball, but as one of the powers in college basketball.
I could not agree with you more. It's extraordinarily important, the transformation. And as a matter of fact, man, if I can pull up the
call it the trace formation.
This is just some of the data that we've had to decipher, go through.
For those listening on radio, Jim just pulled out a 1994 history textbook from 11th grade to show all the different stats and data that they had for the Indiana-Miami game.
But there was a great quote from Trace. He was asked that he was getting notably emotional at the end of the game as the game came to a close. When you think about the last 4 years as a Hoosier, what comes to mind? What do you think about? I just think about being part of the change. Just 2 years ago, we were being booed in our home city, Indianapolis, off the court in the Big Ten tournament. Just being in this moment 2 years later, it's really special. It's really special. Well, you know what? We'll pull that clip later on. You can hear him say that. But he was part of the change, and he will be remembered for that. But it wasn't those guys getting booed. It was that short dude to his right that was getting booed.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's 100% true.
But there's that. But yeah, Indiana, what next? They've got to do more. And Woody, a lot of there are different issues. Hey, you know what? The dude coaching the NBA, maybe he makes mistakes. I'm not a coach. That's the one thing I don't pretend to know, and I'm not going to act like I know this, that, or the other thing. He knows that Indiana needs more talent.
Yeah. And
just looked at the quote-unquote depth on Indiana's bench that was not there. I mean, you got nothing out of Jordan Geronimo. But Tamar Bates played a lot of minutes to give up nothing, to get Indiana nothing.
And I was going to say, I understand that Xavier Johnson had injuries. Jordan Geronimo battled injuries. Race Thompson battled injuries. But having said that, was there a more surprising outcome this season than Indiana maybe being having the shallowest bench? Because they got nothing consistently from those guys. I mean, it would be interesting to know what their season average was in contributions, because what we saw last night, although I know that they hadn't been held scoreless very often from the bench, there were too many times they had 6 points or less. And that's just, when we talked about this team, one of the real reasons we thought that they could make a run and be a Big Ten contender was they had such a deep bench. And again, I understand injuries play a factor in this. Xavier Johnson going down is a big deal. Jordan Geronimo being injured and hurt throughout periods of the season is a big deal. But we thought that this team was going to have 11, 12 guys that could come in and give you some minutes on any given night. And they had maybe 1, 2. That's really about it.